Hot takes are everywhere, but they're often uninformed, and major news is biased. We've had enough of hot takes. We want informed takes. Join Kevin Briggins and Devin Smith as they have rational conversations about domestic politics, geopolitics, and military affairs. Things will get interesting as they bring in expert guests, even from across the aisle. Grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and hop into dates.
Circumstances. For those who are not aware, I'm sure everyone is, but there was a terrorist attack in New Orleans on New Year's morning, I guess you can say, around 3 a.m. A man from Beaumont, Texas, took a truck and ran it down Bourbon Street. And at this point, from what the numbers I know, is he killed 15 people and like 30 injured, 10s injured. It was a tragic and horrific event. But while we don't know the exact motive for why he did it, other than some of the statements he made on Facebook, we do know an underlying ideology for which he claimed to hold to, as he pledged his allegiance to ISIS, and he had an ISIS flag in his truck or on the back of his truck when he committed the attack. And so we just wanted to kind of dive into the ideology behind jihadism and just so everyone understands why these things happen and why people feel the need to commit these types of acts. And so we just really want to dive into it and kind of give people information to understand what exactly is going on and why we are seeing these types of things. You also had the maybe connected, maybe not connected Tesla explosion at the Trump Hotel in Vegas the same morning. And so even though that hadn't been connected, there seems to be some connecting tissues there, but we'll wait to get more word on that. But for right now, we're going to focus on what happened in New Orleans and Bourbon Street. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to diving into this.
Yeah, man. It's interesting because I've heard a lot since Wednesday and since Tuesday, just about the fact that there were people who have been warning about this, and we know for a fact actually that Christopher Wray said this months and months ago that he had never seen in his career that many red lights all over spots where we have intelligence that there are imminent threats. He warned he warned places of worship to be on high alert, so of course we that caught our attention. But it's interesting, unfortunate that we've seen this come to fruition so quickly. So it is disappointing.
And I'll say this from an intelligence standpoint, this was what we were worried about. So we're not worried about an ISIS planned operation. Those are things from an intelligence community we can find out about. We can use certain methods to intercept, certain communications and kind of figure out what's going on. What you cannot plan for is an ISIS or Al Qaeda inspired attack where there is no communication, but someone in their mind just gets inspired and say, I'm going to do this act. And there's no warning, there's no nothing. It's just someone in the spirit of the group, in the spirit of the ideology, decides to carry out an attack on U.S. soil. That is just something that, from an intelligence standpoint, we can't plan for or catch beforehand. And so we know they've called for these types of attacks. They've called for people to rise up and just, so they don't have to control a planet. They just want random people doing random acts of violence. And so that's what we saw on New Year's Day. But we have a guest tonight that I'm really excited about. Do you want to introduce our guest?
Sure. So we are excited to have this guest, Laura Zifer Powell, and she is an expert on Islam. And so there are a lot of things that are said. There are a lot of things that are said about Islam and about what it calls for and what it doesn't call for. And not all of those takes are informed. And in the spirit of this show, we wanted to bring an actual expert on Islam. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce Ms. Powell. Laura,
hey
welcome.
Guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Glad you're here.
Yes.
Thank
we would love for you to kind of give the audience a bit of an understanding of your background and your credentials, because they're stacked. So we're going to brag on you for a minute, or ask you to tell us about yourself so that we can brag on you.
Sure, absolutely. Let's see. I became a Christian when I was 21 years old. I was actually at Duke University, which is not someplace that many people become Christians, but I was majoring in public policy studies. And so when I became a Christian, I started to see immediately how public policy impacts people's lives and really determines a lot of aspects of their daily lives. And so through good policy, we can love people well. Through bad policy, we harm people. And so policy was no longer just a way for me to make a living, but it was something that I was deeply passionate about. And I've continued to invest in that area all these years, but I am also a Christian apologist, and I serve with women in apologetics as the Islam ministry specialist. And I kind of got into Islam, I would say, by accident, setting aside, of course, God's sovereignty and all that for a second, just from a pure human perspective. It was not my plan. I'll say it that way. It was not my plan. So in 2006, my husband and I moved to Colorado Springs so that he could join a ministry called Engineering Ministries International. He was a civil engineer and had the skills and the ability to save millions of lives through water and sanitation in disaster response. He had a background in the military and in disaster response. And so we moved there, and I was asked to join the team as the training and member care specialist. And so one of my first assignments was to train a team to launch to the Middle East, to move there to minister to Muslims, and to provide development and disaster response and that sort of thing. And so I didn't know anything about Islam at the time. I told him, look, I'll start learning and I'll share whatever I'm learning. So I took a class in a graduate level course in Islam. I started reading the Quran, reading the Hadiths, interviewing Muslims, visiting mosques, finding out as much as I could. I spent some time in Jordan and in Egypt, and I just shared whatever I was learning with the team. And then we launched the team like a year later, and I thought, okay, now I can move on to the next topic. What else do you have for me? Well, not too long later, I was asked to go to Afghanistan and then to Greece with the refugee crisis that was primarily Muslims leaving Syria, Iraq, that part of the world. I then started volunteering in the refugee community of Clarkston, Georgia, and worked with Muslims full time. And so next thing I knew, I had this kind of, I guess, expertise both in the Islamic sources and in ministering to Muslims all over the world. And I was asked to join Women in Apologetics as the Islam ministry specialist. We created a course, a 20-lesson course called Islam Foundations that's available at womeninapologetics.com. And I have continued to speak whenever I'm asked on Islam. I think it's an incredibly important topic that people need to understand. They generally, most Westerners do not understand Islam at all, in my experience. And yet it is, by all measures that I read, the fastest growing religion in the world. And this is not because people are generally becoming persuaded that Islam is true. It's generally because most Muslim women only have the opportunity to have children. They're expected to have lots and lots of children. Men have multiple wives, and the penalty for leaving Islam is death. So obviously that is quite the deterrent from leaving Islam, unless you are absolutely 100% convinced that something else is true.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm interested in, and it's just amazing to hear, your journey and the expertise that you've built in this. And I've observed sort of anecdotally this adoption of Islam, especially in sort of the manosphere realm of social media and YouTube, et cetera. It seems like there is an attraction to the, I would say, really misogynistic aspects of Islam. Have you seen an uptick in people starting to warm up to Islam in the U.S.?
Definitely, yeah. When I post something on social media about Islam, and especially on X, Twitter, I receive all kinds of responses that are disagreeing with me, that are hateful, that are calling me names, all this sort of thing. And so of course I see a lot of videos of people converting and defending Islam and that sort of thing. I do think that Christianity is that Christians in the West are in part to blame, because as we have sort of attempted to emasculate men and claim that masculinity is toxic and men have no authority and all of this sort of thing, we see men, not surprisingly, I would say, turning to other worldviews. The problem is that Christianity is true, even as we fail to live out its teachings well. And Islam is a very, very dangerous, and in fact, the true toxic worldview.
I believe that is very true from my understanding of Islam. As many know, I have a degree in Middle Eastern studies, and Islam is a big part of that. And I had to learn a lot. And then just basically from my background from military intelligence, dealing with terrorist groups. And so understanding what they believe. And so often I want to get in their head or get people to understand kind of why someone would carry out an attack like that in the name of a Islamic group. So often we hear the term kind of radical Islam. What exactly is that, and just kind of help us understand what that is.
Right. Well, I was actually just, my parents are visiting, and I was just having a conversation with them last night that I'm a bit uncomfortable with how overwhelmingly we've just adopted the term radical Islam to describe Muslims who practice violence, because that is actually Islam. That is what Islam teaches. So the so-called moderate Muslims are not actually following the Quran and the Hadith, the sacred sources of Islam. It's the people who we call radicals who are actually living out Quranic Islam. And so the Prophet Muhammad, false Prophet Muhammad, is the founder of Islam. He first claimed to be a prophet of Judaism and Christianity. Actually, first, he believed that he was demon possessed. He had this encounter in a cave. According to the Islamic sources, he walked away in terror with his muscles twitching, went home, 40-year-old man, hid under the covers and told his wife he was demon possessed, hide him, bad things are going to happen to him. His wife said, no, you can't. You're such a good guy. There's no way that you're demon possessed. And his wife and her uncle actually convinced Muhammad that he must be a prophet, that he must have been visited by an angel rather than a demon. And eventually Muhammad, after planning to commit suicide numerous times, he eventually embraced his role as a prophet and made the most of it, I suppose you would say. So he started out by, in his first 10, 12 years as a so-called prophet, just preaching a message of monotheism, and that he was the basically kind of the Messiah, the awaited prophet of Judaism and Christianity. Well, he was rejected, and he by the people in Mecca, by the Jews and the Christians in the area. Eventually, he was actually driven out of Mecca. So about 12 years after proclaiming this message, he had to flee for his life, and he went to Medina with only about 40 followers, mostly friends and family, close friends and family. And before too long, he realized that these people, his family and friends who had left everything to follow him to Medina, needed money for food and such. And so they began attacking caravans and killing people and stealing from them. And this was going pretty well for them. And Muhammad kept getting these revelations from Allah affirming that this was the right thing to do. This was a good path. And so the attacks escalated. He became more and more violent. He took over entire towns and villages. He gained more and more followers. And eventually he had a military of about 10,000 men and returned to Mecca and took over and slaughtered a whole bunch of people, even as the Meccans tried to surrender and said, yeah, we don't want to fight, you win. He carried out his attack and his slaughter and took over. The last 10 years of Muhammad's life, we have in the most trusted Islamic sources 86 different battles recorded that he fought in 10 years. I mean, that's constant fighting. And the Quran says that whatever revelations come later, if they contradict any revelations that came earlier, then the later revelations are the ones that are to be followed and trusted. They cancel out, they abrogate the earlier ones. And so it's also significant that the last major chapter of the Quran to be revealed is the most violent chapter. And it has, all sorts of passages about go out and kill the non-Muslims wherever you find them and things like that. So Muhammad is repeatedly said in the Quran to be the excellent pattern of conduct, and to be the one who brings what is good and forbids what is bad, and the one who is to be imitated in all things. And so if that's if a Muslim is to follow the Quran, then really they have no choice but to live a life of fighting and ending the lives of non-Muslims. But there's kind of this a lot of Muslims will recognize that there's kind of this three-stage process, where at first when you're completely outnumbered, you just preach a message of tolerance and peace. And you say things like, you have your religion, I have my religion. You play the victim, say, oh, Muslims are so oppressed, we're so oppressed, and people are just so Islamophobic. And Muhammad did that sort of thing. He would always play the victim and try to gain the sympathy of the majority people around him. So this is really, I will say that a lot of Muslims don't know the Quran. They've never read the Quran. They maybe know a few verses that they've memorized. They may not even know what the words mean that they're repeating. And I am certainly not saying that all Muslims are violent, but I am saying that Islam, the religion, is a violent religion inherently and necessarily, if you were to take it seriously in its original writings.
That's
I'm glad you. I'm glad you made that point. I've always said that too. Who we call the fundamentalists, they are the ones who are actually following the Quranic teachings. They are the ones who are actually following Islam. And the reason that they are, I know we're going to talk about Salafism as kind of what it is, but the way I like to explain to people is think as a puritanical movement, like a reformation of Islam. We need to go back to the earliest practices of Islam and carry those out. And that is exactly what they're doing. Can you explain to people, because I know a lot of people have heard of the Quran. What are the hadiths and the Sunnah that kind of puts this whole thing together?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, because so the hadiths are the traditions, the sayings, the teachings, the actions of Muhammad. And as I mentioned, the Quran commands Muslims to listen to Muhammad, obey him, calls him the excellent pattern of conduct. And so if Muslims are to obey the Quran, they have to know how Muhammad lived his life, what he said, what he taught, what he did. But those things are not in the Quran. And so they have to go to the hadith. And these are again, the collections of Muhammad's life stories and teachings and how he responded to different situations. The Sunnah kind of includes both the hadiths and his biography, the most trusted biography of Muhammad, which is it's called The Life of Muhammad, at least in English. And both the hadiths and the Life of Muhammad come hundreds of years later. There are contradictions all over the place. Muslims will acknowledge this, and they're ranked according to categories of strength. So you'll have strong hadiths that have been traced back to Muhammad according to Muslim scholars. You'll have kind of weak hadiths and things like this. So there are different categories of it, but they have to be taken into account in order to obey the Quran, in order to follow the Quran, despite protest about that from some Muslims. So because Muslims do see. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you'll hear. I seem to be hearing more and more Muslims, realizing how incredibly disturbing the hadiths are, and trying to say, in some cases, that they are Quran-only Muslims. But again, then you have to deal with how you're supposed to follow the Quran, which says to follow Muhammad if you don't know anything about how Muhammad lived.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think it's important for people to understand a lot of the things that are happening, they aren't found in the Quran, even though there are some Quranic verses that we're going to talk about that kind of support some of these types of actions, but a lot of these things come from the hadiths. There are stories about the actions of Muhammad or things Muhammad said that are guiding principles to Muslims. And so, especially Muslim scholars, the average Muslim going to the mosque might not even be aware of these things. They may have never read the hadiths, but
Right.
to the imam, to the religious scholar, to the deep followers of the religion, they absolutely follow the hadiths, and there are some really, really heavy things in there. So in terms of the Quran, what kind of give us some examples of some verses that kind of support some of the actions that we're seeing from these groups?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Quran chapter 9 was the last major chapter to be revealed. It has several verses that say things like 929. A lot of Muslim scholars will say Quran 929 is basically the Great Commission equivalent for Muslims. It says, "Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor in the last day, nor who hold forbidden that which has been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, and who don't acknowledge the religion of truth, until they pay the jizya, which is a tax that Muslims charge non-Muslims to allow them to live as second-class citizens." So it says to fight them until they pay the jizya willingly with submission and feel themselves subdued. And Islam means submission, and a lot of Muslims will say, well, it means your life is submitted to God, and there's some truth to that. They I think a lot of Muslims may really believe that that's the full extent of it, but Muhammad often used it as a way of, basically, do you submit to the sword and become a Muslim, or should I just go ahead and kill you? And for people of the book, which is Christians and Jews, they were also given this option to pay this tax to live and keep their religion, but to live as clearly as second-class citizens. So I'm not talking about, they're not quite as they don't get to be president or something like that. I mean, like, they're the street sweepers in Pakistan. They are slaves in Pakistan. They are kept in abject poverty for their entire lives, and things like this. So there are millions of Christian slaves in the world today, in the Muslim world, because of this doctrine of jizya, which was actually proposed by some Jews who were about to be killed by Muhammad, and they were trying to strike a deal. They said, "Well, will you just let us live and let us stay in our land if we give you half of what we produce?" Muhammad thought that sounded like a pretty good idea, so that has continued for some Jews and Muslims around the world.
Wow.
So also Quran 9:111, it says, "Surely Allah has bought of the believers their persons and their property for this, that they shall have the garden. They fight in Allah's way, so they slay and are slain." So I was just reading, actually, on X today, from Ridvan Adi, I don't know how to say his name, Adivan Adiyar, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the state prophet, he goes by. That's his name, his nickname, alias. And he used to be a Muslim, and I find him to be a very reliable source. I don't know where he heard this, but he shared that verse, Quran 9:111, was found posted on the wall of the New Orleans terrorist bar. So
Yeah.
yeah, you think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
God has bought your life for this purpose, that you slay others and you are slain. That's why you
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah. I'm not surprised, because I was going to read this quote and kind of get your thoughts on it. According to the FBI, this is something that he said on Facebook 2 hours before he did the attack. Now, he said he was going to kill his family. He was going to invite them over for a celebration, and he was going to end up killing his family. He decided not to do that because he wanted the headline or the story to be, about the war between the believers and the unbelievers. Kind of what to me that sounds like 929 to me. In terms of like you can tell those Quranic verses are clearly kind of were inspiring him in this attack.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. And that makes sense, because well, for one thing, Muhammad encouraged his followers to deceive their parents, their families, and brothers-in-law and such, in order to kill them, and then to kill their own families. And so, it makes sense that this man who had been inspired by ISIS, who's inspired by Muhammad, that he would naturally, when he became, really committed to Islam and passionate about it, and was probably reading the Quran, not maybe the Hadith as well, that he would want to take out his family. But at the same time, in a Western culture, we would tend to think of that as, oh, they must have had some sort of domestic dispute, right? It must have been a personal thing. And so if he wanted, as he said he did, to really focus the attention on the war between believers and unbelievers, between Muslims and non-Muslims, then that's exactly what you do. You shift the plan from take out your family to take out a whole bunch of people celebrating on Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve. So that really aligns perfectly with what we know from of the priorities of Muhammad, the teachings of Muhammad, and the types of terror attacks that are inspired by groups like ISIS. So yeah, I mean, those who were partying on Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve are certainly not likely to be committed Muslims.
Exactly. I was thinking that too. I mean, even from a Christian standpoint, we kind of know what Bourbon Street stands for. We have an idea when we think of the bars, the clubs, the adult entertainment, the type of things that are happening at 3 a.m. on Bourbon Street,
Right.
So it makes sense that someone who is a devout Muslim in this regard would target that area for an attack, given how he
Right.
would view those people in that moment. We hear a lot about how Islam is a religion of peace, and clearly you agree with that.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Yeah.
That's that. Yeah. No comment.
So someone asked what was the passage. It's Quran 9:11 and 9:29 were the two passages we talked about.
So yeah, 929 and 9:111. So chapter 9, verse 111.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's also chapter 9, verse 73 that says, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites and be unyielding to them. Their abode is hell and evil is their destination. And people will often say to me, well, the violence cannot be about Muslim versus non-Muslim, because Muslims take the lives of other Muslims as well. So how do you explain that? There's actually more violence within Muslim nations than within Western nations by Muslims. Well, a big part of the reason is because of verses like this, 973, in which Muslims are also told to take out the hypocrites, anyone they perceive to not be completely and totally committed to living out Islam correctly. And so they have all sorts of opportunities in Muslim countries to end the lives of people who they perceive to be hypocrites. Can you imagine?
Yeah. Are you?
If any time a Christian, saw someone behaving in a way that we realized was not in perfect accordance with the scriptures, if we decided that it was our responsibility to end their lives, we'd get a situation a lot like the Islamic world. It'd be a disaster. So
yeah.
Sorry,
are you familiar with the term? Are you familiar with the term jahiliyyah? It basically means time of ignorance. And so a lot of the jihadists, what they believe is that they're in a time of ignorance where Muslims have lost their way. They're no longer following the Quran. They're no longer following the teachings of Muhammad, and therefore they're not really Muslims. Therefore, you can justify killing them because they're not really Muslims because they're in a time of ignorance. And so, and so that they have a lot of ways of justifying killing people.
Exactly. And there are many more verses. I'm happy to give you, more passages or not, but there's several more. I mean, like Quran 9:5.
I'm just going to tell people to follow you on social media because you're always putting this type of stuff out there. That's why I immediately reached out to you and I was like, we need to talk about this because I know you understand I understand the ideology. I know you understand the exact Quranic passages that deal with this stuff. And so,
Right, exactly. Yeah. And on Facebook, probably 99% of my posts are public. Anybody can see them, whether we're Facebook friends or not. So Laura Zifer Powell on Facebook, and then on X, I think it's Laura Z Powell, might be Laura Zifer Powell. I'm not sure, but anyway. So I do share a lot about that. Quran 9:5 also says, when the sacred months have passed, kill the polytheists wherever you find them and capture them and besiege them and sit and wait for them at every place of ambush. But if they should repent, establish prayer, and give zakat, like the payment, then let them go on their way. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful. So Allah is so forgiving and merciful that if you pay the Muslims and repent and become a Muslim and, all these things, then you're allowed to live. But I want to point out too that these verses, a lot of times, and I'm not looking at the comments right now. We're live streaming, but I'm not on X or looking at the comments on YouTube. But so people may be posting, you're taking verses out of context and all that sort of thing. For one thing, I'm not taking it out of context, but Muslims will often say, well, these are defensive wars, people were attacking them. And this is just regarding, how to do war. If you read these passages, if you pay attention to the passages, they are saying that this is about a person's belief. You fight them until they believe. You fight those who do not believe in Allah or the last day, or and do not forbid that which Allah has forbidden. This is all about Islam, Muslims versus non-Muslims. It says, in 9:5, what I just read, to kill the polytheists wherever you can find them, capture them, besiege them, sit and wait for them at every place of ambush. That doesn't sound all that, defensive. And when we read about the life of Muhammad and the circumstances of the revealing of these verses, we see this was in no way any sort of defensive war when others were coming at the Muslims, and Muhammad was just giving revelations about how to respond when they were being attacked. And if you look at even at history, I mean, we had Muhammad. We don't have Islam in charge of most of the world, and then Christians going in and trying to take over, and it's the opposite. Islam spread very, very quickly by the sword, and Christians had to defend themselves in order to keep them from taking over Europe and the world. And so we also see and I'll mention Quran chapter 3 verse 110 tells Muslims that they are the best of peoples, evolved for mankind, enjoining what is right, forbidding what is wrong, and believing in God. They're the best of all people. The Quran also tells Muslims that Christians, Jews, and polytheists are the worst of all creatures. So I don't know if you've ever seen a Muslim react when you mention a pig or pepperoni or pork, but it's quite dramatic in my experience. But according to the Quran, we Christians and Jews and polytheists are worse than pigs. We're worse than insects that you swat at and kill when they're inconvenient. I've asked a few different imams about these verses, and I'll never forget asking about this one. And this one imam, I said, well, what about how we Christians and Jews are the worst of all creatures? All creatures, really? And he said, well, don't feel that bad. I mean, polytheists are also in the same category. So okay, thanks. I feel a lot better about things now.
I feel way better. Way better.
So, there is not this, there is not the teaching that comparable to the Christian and Jewish teaching that all people have inherent dignity, value, and worth. There are a couple hadiths that say something about being created in the image of God, but the context makes it very clear it's not talking anything about having inherent dignity or value or anything like that. It says one of the two places where this is recorded. It says that Adam was created in the image of God, of Allah, 90 feet tall. And all the people since Adam have been shrinking, and so now we're the lowly 5'6", 5'6" people that we are. But
not Kevin.
Anyway.
He's still he's got more glory than us, man. He's pretty tall.
It's funny. I mean, not funny, but the fact you point out that we are worse than swine. I can tell a lot of people, October 7th was the first time a lot of people really kind of saw that level of violence. They could say, how could they do that? I have seen violence from these people that is, you just won't believe, against other people. And they don't care. I mean, you really are it's like slaughtering a pig to them. They will do I'm not going to say it because I don't want YouTube to come after us, but some of the most worst violent acts you can think of, I have seen them commit against other human beings and not even think twice about it because they don't even view them as human beings. And so, that's what I wanted to bring you on to talk about this, so people can understand, how could this man do this? What is it about Islam or ISIS, this ideology in particular, that would lead someone to commit this act to feel that they were justified in committing this act? Because to the average person, it just seems crazy, And so the question I wanted to get to earlier, we hear Islam is a religion of peace, but there's this concept within Islam known as the house of war and the house of peace. Can you kind of explain to our listeners kind of how they view those two lanes and how that plays out within the religion?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the House of Islam or House of Peace describes places where Sharia has been implemented. Sharia means Islamic law. So Muslims are in charge of everything. Non-Muslims are second-class citizens. Those who leave Islam are to be killed. The House of War describes places where Islamic law has not yet been implemented. And if a country is not governed by Sharia, then that country is at war with Islam and with Muslims worldwide. So, but there are these three stages that I alluded to earlier of jihad, of war, according to the model provided by Muhammad. And so kind of the stage one is if Muslims are the very tiny minority with no real power or influence, they are to spread the word that Islam is a religion of peace and try to make individual converts. Again, they can emphasize that they are victims, that they're oppressed, that they're treated unfairly, whatever it takes to try to gain the sympathy of those who are in power. Stage two is, if they have access to resources like Muhammad and his followers did once they got to Medina, and they started raiding caravans and doing individual little attacks here and there. So also Muslims today who have the resources to conduct small individual attacks like that, they are to do so. They're also to look for ways to gain political power, run for office. They are supposed to be working covertly to increase their numbers and increase their influence so that they can get to a point where they can take over. And then stage 3 is basically when they have the numbers, they have the manpower, they have the political power for a takeover. They are to fully conquer the land and the people and implement Sharia. And then that land becomes part of the House of Islam.
Yeah.
And so, this is something that I'll mention along with that is this doctrine, Islamic doctrine of taqiyya, which kind of means deception or lying. Muslims are permitted to and encouraged to deceive and lie for the sake of the spread of Islam. And so there are actually a lot of things. People think that Christianity and Islam have a lot in common. It is so surface level. We define just about everything differently. Adultery is defined completely differently. So even though we might say, oh, well, we all agree adultery is wrong. Well, okay, yes. But in Islam, men are permitted up to 4 wives, even though Muhammad had 11. That's a different story. He got all sorts of great exceptions, from Allah. But Muslim men are permitted 4 wives, but they are also permitted an endless number of sex slaves and an endless number of temporary wives. So when they're out of town fighting at war and they miss their wives, they are encouraged to practice temporary marriage, which we call prostitution.
And this is something we saw. This is something we saw with ISIS. Is when they took over areas, they basically took those women as slaves and did unspeakable things to them. And
Right. Exactly.
People just don't understand how bad it was in those areas in which ISIS took over and put in Islamic law and lived out what they truly believed. It was really hell on earth for those people.
Exactly.
And so I'm glad you pointed that out, that these people are really living out the teachings of Muhammad. And not those who claim to be the moderates or the ones we embrace. But these are truly living out the actual wording of what Islam claims to be. You said something. Yeah, you said something that triggered a thought. You mentioned jihad.
Yes.
Can you define that for our listeners?
Yeah, it means struggle or battle or war. And so a lot of Muslims will say, well, it has nothing to do with fighting a physical war. It's about striving within yourself to become a better person. Well, it is used that way a few times in the Quran, where although you have to consider the context, what does it mean to be a better person? The more people you kill and slay and all of this, the better person you are, according to Islam. But it's also unbelievably clear that it usually does mean doing physical battle. And so Muhammad said repeatedly things like, the very best thing on earth and heaven, better than paradise, is fighting in battle. He said, anyone who meets Allah after his life without any battle scars on his body meets Allah with a lacking. He did not get it done. He was not a great Muslim. You don't get battle scars from striving to be a better person. You get them from going to war, right? He said that if he could have anything he wanted, it would be to fight, kill non-Muslims, die as a martyr, and then go to paradise, but come right back, fight some more, die as a martyr again, go to paradise, come right back. He said that was the only thing worth leaving paradise for, was fighting, because fighting is the best thing ever. And so these many different hadith sayings, like the ones I've just referred to, make it unbelievably clear that Muslims are expected to fight an actual battle, actual war against non-Muslims. And of course, the verses from Quran 9 make that pretty clear as well, I'd say.
Yeah.
But jihad is to strive, to fight, to battle, to war.
Yeah, and like I said, the New Orleans attackers, his statement just makes more and more sense. You know, the war between the believers and the unbelievers. That's what he wanted the focus to be on.
Right. Exactly.
I've got a question here. One of the things that before I really got the benefit of being around folks who are experts on the Quran, it was evident to me that if the things that I was hearing, the verses that I was hearing read, if those are in the Quran, just like a Christian would say, anybody who claims to be a Christian who does not actually follow the scriptures is not serious. It just instantly made sense to me. Okay, ISIS is probably following the Quran more closely than the average Muslim around the world. And I'm curious. I know you've kind of said this, but when you look at ISIS, when you look at the Taliban, do you view it that way, that they are actually being more faithful to the Quran than other Muslims who are not practicing the war and the conquering mentality, the martyrdom mentality?
Definitely, yes. ISIS is obeying the Quran. Al-Qaeda obeys the Quran. Boko Haram from West Africa, they are obeying the Quran. The Taliban in Afghanistan obey the Quran. The peaceful, friendly Muslim who lives next door to you probably doesn't know the Quran. I do want to, I guess, kind of emphasize again that not everyone who claims to be a Muslim is violent or is deceiving you. The Quran does say that Muslims are not allowed to even be friends with non-Muslims. And then the commentaries, the most trusted Islamic commentators on those verses say that Muslims are to hate non-Muslims in their hearts, but they're allowed to pretend to be friends with us if they need security from us. But the Quran does say they are not allowed to be friends with us. And but in my experience, most Muslims have also not read the Quran. And so what they believe is dependent entirely on what their imams have taught them, what their parents have taught them, what communities they're a part of, and that sort of thing. However, even having said that, it is also the case in my experience that even peaceful, loving Muslims who fled their countries because they hate war and they're sick and tired of it and they want to live in peace and educate their children and live a good life, even those Muslims will almost always vote for a Muslim over anybody else, support Muslims even if they are radicalized or following Islam, following the Quran closely, and that sort of thing. And so it is very much kind of a group mentality that even even peaceful Muslims are moving the ball forward for a takeover of Islam and the implementation of Sharia in the United States or in the West. So it really is a dangerous ideology that is absolutely incompatible with the Constitution, with Christianity, with freedom of religion, with freedom of speech. With Muhammad would also he also had people assassinated and assassinated people himself who had just made fun of him. People who had made poems, kind of satirically, kind of mocking him for claiming to be this great prophet. And so, even and we've seen that over the years, right? We've all been around long enough to see what happened when the Charlie Hebdo magazine, had a drawing of Muhammad and they were taken out and all of that. So this is not an ideology that is compatible with any sort of historical American way of life.
Yeah. Trying to think. I keep losing my question. Because we keep going
We did
on.
have a viewer question.
We did. Go ahead.
Come in. So Kimberly said, she said she knows this is, a little bit off topic, but any thoughts on the situation in the UK? Some of the things you were mentioning, basically about, how non-believers, quote unquote, are spoken of in the Quran. Basically, any sort of treatment is basically okay for the non-believer. Any comment on what's happening in the UK? And she mentioned specifically, some of the things that have been done to white women in the UK.
Yeah, I have all kinds of thoughts about what's going on in the UK. It's I've been following the story for years now of so-called grooming gangs of Muslims. What word can we use for YouTube? Graping little girls who are British. And the numbers are over 250,000 little British girls have been violated in this way over the last several years. And by and large, the government of England has done absolutely nothing, for the primary reason that they don't want to spread Islamophobia. They are afraid that if they prosecute Muslims for what they've done to little British girls, that they will appear Islamophobic. Talk about no backbone whatsoever. I don't know if you guys have daughters, but can you just imagine that this happens to your daughter, and it's happening to all your friends' daughters, and the authorities find out about it. You tell the authorities right away, and they do nothing because they don't want Muslims to get a bad reputation, and they don't want themselves to be called Islamophobes. So they do nothing about that violation of your daughter. It's sick. It's disgusting. It breaks my heart. In the words of David Wood, it flips my crazy switch.
Yeah, I mean that's a great way to describe it. Is as you're talking about that right there, flips the crazy switch right there. Because I do have a little girl, and they'd just have to go ahead and put me under the jail. They'd have to put me under the jail.
And to make it worse, what the UK is doing is cracking on those who oppose, cracking down on those who are speaking out. That's what makes it just crazy.
Yeah.
Exactly. I have a friend who was in a public park in the little area of the park that is publicly known to be the one and only little place in England where you're permitted freedom of speech. In Hyde Park, it's called Speaker's Corner, and she was sharing the gospel, and she was stabbed repeatedly by a Muslim, And the Muslim got away. She passed out. She came to again and stood up and started preaching the gospel some more. She's talking about bold. But
Wow.
when the police arrived, they arrested her, and they told her that if she was stabbed by a Muslim multiple times, then she must have been disturbing the peace. So this is the type of spineless, disgusting place that England has become. Again, not every individual British person by any stretch. I haven't even ever been there. So, but from what I'm always reading and hearing from my friends who live there and work there and spend a lot of time in jail there lately, this is what is happening. So,
Yeah,
it's really sad.
I heard a story, and I can't remember if I can't remember if it came out of the UK, but I saw Kimberly mention it here. There was a case where I think it was 4 Pakistani men were found with 2 young girls, one of them 13. The police came. The 13-year-old girl was drunk out of her mind, and almost completely naked, and they arrested her for being drunk, and she was convicted, and they did nothing. They did nothing to the 4 men for being alone with 2 young girls, one of them 13. Nothing to them.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the opposite of masculinity. I am a huge advocate of biblical masculinity. I love men who protect women, who protect little girls, who speak the truth at the cost of their own reputation, of even maybe their own freedom or their job or whatever it costs them. Because when enough people do that, that's when we get to live in a free and God-glorifying society. When all it takes is for the for strong people, knowledgeable people, informed people to do nothing or to say nothing, just mind their own business, for things to really start to fall apart. And so, I'll just take this opportunity to thank both of you for using your platform to speak the truth and not to prioritize being liked and loved and celebrated by the world, but to say what people need to hear and to give a platform to unpopular and uncomfortable messages like what we've had to talk about this evening.
It's
Absolutely.
It's unfortunate that these positions are unlikable positions, but I think that people are done. I've thought many times, as we've done this show, I appreciate the bravery of my brother Kevin here. I've thought many times, is it going to hurt me from a business standpoint doing this? But I realized that that's a coward's mentality. If we don't stand up, then eventually one day we'll have to give an account for not standing up.
Exactly.
And I'd rather go down and be able to say that I did what I was supposed to do, as opposed to try to protect my own neck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your daughter is noticing. I'll just tell you that. I don't know her personally, but I'm a daughter and we notice when our dads stand up for us. So
Praise God.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if I deserve any credit, babe. I'm just too dumb to know there's consequences for this, but I just can't shut up.
No, too funny.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think that you got too much soldier in you still. I think that's what it is.
That's right. I think so. That's right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
I
Laura, this has been really good. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
I was gonna
Devin.
say I did have another question if you got
Go
a
ahead.
few
oh,
more
sure.
minutes. Um,
Sure.
you know, you talked about the fact that uh, jihad is not just a spiritual. It's not just a spiritual thing.
Right.
You know, contrary to what has been said, and you see this sort of you know, tribal sort of mentality around Islam, and
Hmm.
you're seeing things like what is happening in the UK. We saw what happened here on Tuesday night, and then immediately the following morning in New York, you had a massive crowd of protesters walking up the
Yeah.
street chanting "Globalize the Intifada."
Hmm.
So
Right.
you know, you see it on display. You talked about it.
Hmm.
That was concerning to me because that was brazen. That was
Hmm. Hmm.
incredibly brazen. And what it says to me is that in the West, and I've heard a lot of people say this, and I think the UK is the prime example of it. We do not understand Islam. We do not
Right.
understand the mentality, and
Hmm.
so the in the West, our tendency is to try to be as tolerant as possible to a fault. And my
Yeah.
question to you is, what would you say to the person who you know, still feels like or they're afraid of being viewed as intolerant for taking a stand on this stuff?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say, do you want to tell your children and your grandchildren that you let violence and evil take over what other people handed down to you so that you wouldn't be called a name, so that you wouldn't be disliked by somebody, so that you would have no personal cost to pay whatsoever? Are you okay with answering to the Lord that you would have spoken the truth, but someone may not have liked you? Are you serious? Have you read any books by anyone who lived before us and about the cost of being a Christian in most of the world? In most times and most places, the cost of being a Christian has been you will not be liked. You will not be celebrated in this world. You will not be popular in this world. You may not be promoted in this world, but the best is yet to come. Jesus gave his life so that we could be bold now, so that we could sacrifice now, so we could give ourselves now, because our hope isn't in this life. Our hope is in the next life and for all eternity. And we're going to have to live for all eternity knowing that either we gave it all here and now when we had a chance to impact sinners and those around us, um, or we can live for eternity knowing, that we kind of protected ourselves first and foremost. And I think that our memories will be intact. And in fact, I believe they'll be perfected for all eternity. So don't focus on the little dot that is today or what somebody today is going to think of you. Most people who um, who are not going to approve of you today are not informed. They could not have a debate with you and hold a candle to you if you know anything about what the Quran says, what the Hadith says, that sort of thing. Learn the evidence. Learn evidence, because then the disagreement is not even personal so much anymore. It's about the information. I ask people all the time, okay, well, if you're upset about what I'm saying, what part of my argument do you disagree with, and where is your evidence that has led you to disagree with me? Let's have a discussion about the evidence. And then it's not really so personal anymore. But still, people still call me names, Islamophobe and bigot and all of the things. But the disciples of Jesus wore those sorts of threats and attacks and such as a badge of honor. And how dare we be given everything? I mean, just the probably the easiest lives as Christians have ever lived in 2,000 years, and not be willing to risk our reputation or a job or something like even jail time. Even our lives, because you know what? When we are done with this life, that's when the real party begins. That's when things get awesome. And I tend to think that if people are not willing to sacrifice here and now, they probably don't have a very good theology of heaven and the new earth. And so that might be a good place to start as well.
Well said. Wow. I mean, it's a total mic drop moment. That was excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys again. Just love the work that you do, and I really appreciate you guys.
Awesome.
All right, Laura. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll have to have you on again, hopefully under better circumstances.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
Awesome.
All right. See you next time.
Have a good one.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye. Man, that was...
That was excellent, man.
That was so good. I'm
Awesome.
glad that she was able to come on, and on short notice. I'm glad that worked out. Because that's what a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people here in the West don't understand what it is that we're dealing with and why these attacks happen and why would someone do that. It's because they are actually following what the Quran teaches, what the Hadith teach. And so, yeah, Islam is a religion of peace when everything is under the rule and law of Islam. That's it. If it's not, then it's a house of war, and they are to subdue it to be under the house of Islam. Yeah, that's the game, and so that's the game they're playing. And so when Europe imports millions of Muslim immigrants, it's like you have no idea what you're doing. They are literally there to take over. They're not trying to assimilate. They are there to take over that land for Islam, plain and simple, right? And the British government's just completely lost their minds because they're afraid to be called a name. They're afraid to, be called Islamophobic. They're afraid to not be called tolerant. They're so left and they're so liberal. They're bringing in their own demise, right? And so, yeah, that's what's going on. And so I hate this guy allowed evil to take over and for him to commit these acts, but that's what he did. He said he had a dream that led him that he had a dream about joining ISIS, and he knew this is what he was supposed to do. Because he had, over the last few years, recently converted to Islam and, dove in deep. And when he dove in deep, this is where it led him. Which is sadly the right place if you're going to say you're following Islam. And so that's kind of the point I wanted to bring out, is that these are not the radical beliefs that we call them, as she said. These are just Islamic beliefs. These people are trying to follow the earliest teachings of Muhammad. They're trying to mimic the actions of Muhammad, even to the point where some of them will not use a toothbrush. So back in the day, these kind of like twigs that Muhammad and the people used to clean their teeth. Some of them have gone so far as to try to live like Muhammad to that degree, where they will forbid modern things to use the things of the 7th century. Yeah, they're just trying to follow Muhammad as close as they can. And when you do, these are the things that come about, because when people try to compare Muhammad to Jesus, like, y'all have no idea what you're talking about. If I'm gonna follow Jesus, what does it look like? I walk around healing people, serving people, preaching the good news, telling people to repent, breaking bread with sinners. Like, what does it look to walk around and follow Jesus? If I say I'm going to follow Muhammad, I'm going to look at his life, that's going to be completely different. I'm going to be at war, I'm going to be enslaving people. I'm going to be doing all types of things that people today would not find to be of peace or of goodwill in general. We didn't even get into, his youngest wife of 9 years old. And so when they take young women below a age, that's okay, because Muhammad did.
Right.
And
that was
there's just so much that
you gave him too much credit, because he married her at 7 and he consummated the marriage at 9.
Yeah, he waited.
Yeah,
he waited. Yes.
Yeah, that's the stuff. That's the stuff right there. It's interesting to me that she said that most Muslims have not, or at least the Muslims who say that Islam is a religion of peace, have not read the Quran. And
so this is the thing. Even though I have it in English, so I have it here. The Quran technically is not supposed to be translated. According to them, if you don't read it in Arabic, you have not read it.
Wow.
Yeah, and so a lot of people who, if they don't speak Arabic, at least they haven't read the Quran. A lot of people, even who do speak Arabic, they don't have they don't go to their Muslim bookstore and get, they don't have their own Lifeway, and they just go get Qurans and
my man said Lifeway though.
I understand. So she's right. A lot of times what they know is what they've been told by their imam. They know what certain verses they've been told to memorize and recite, and they would go through certain rituals where certain verses they recite, but in terms of just reading the whole thing in deep study, no, most Muslims, just don't. They've never done it. And so that's why when she was over there in Egypt and Jordan and other places, she actually talked to imams, because those are the people who have read it. Those are the people who understand it and teach. And so she was able to sit down and have conversations with that level of, person, which was good and helpful. And so she got a great understanding of what it is they believe. She didn't have to make it up, because she's had conversations about these verses, and a lot of times they just don't have answers,
Right.
Because they aren't the warmongering Muslims. They're the peaceful next door neighbor Muslims. And so but when they're presented with these verses, they don't really know how to handle them.
Yeah.
Because they are in their mind, they're not those type of people. They're not trying to do that. They don't want to murder and pillage. That's not what they're trying to do. And most Muslims don't want to do that. That's what I really want to bring home as well. But they aren't living out the book.
Right.
If they don't. And so that's also the other side. And so it's a very, very troubling dichotomy that we're faced with. And so, so I just wanted to talk about that so we can understand why someone would take a truck and just run down people in the street in the name of ISIS. This is why. So
yes, but very, very well said. I think it's very important that people understand that this is not something to be played with. I very much appreciate that Laura said this is a dangerous ideology. It's dangerous.
It
It's
is.
not
Oh,
to be played
100%.
with.
It is not.
And
It
the Western tendency to want to and I will say this is actually a bad Western tendency right now. It's gone to a level that lacks structure, it lacks wisdom. Because you see what's happening in the UK. It is tolerance at all costs, right?
yes.
And it's tolerance at expense of the truth. Because the problem in the West, if we're going to look at the UK as an example, the UK has largely been secularized. The UK is a post-Christian
Absolutely.
society.
100%.
They don't believe in truth, or at least they won't assent to it consciously. They don't live like they don't believe in truth, but they won't assent to it consciously. And so when you say that we have to be tolerant of everything, the idea is that nothing is true, therefore everything is somebody's truth, and you can't attack that. And so that's the mentality under which they say, oh, well, we can't be Islamophobic. That's the mentality under which that is done. And that doesn't work in reality. And you can watch what's happening over there. And all I have to say is that what you want? Because that's the kind of stuff that we've been talking about. That is the mentality that you see from folks who tend to lean left. I think, people are waking up now. But that's the mentality we see here in America. The progressive mentality is what you are seeing in the UK. That is the fruition of that mentality and what happens to the society. And so this is not a message to foment any sort of hate. It is a message to say that truth matters. And if you don't pay attention and stand up for the truth when it is threatened, there is a lot to lose. There are people who are going to be hurt. And New Orleans, if Christopher Wray and to be quite honest, I think her name is Sarah Adams. She's been on Sean Ryan's show several times. She's been in the intelligence community. She straight up said that we are in trouble. We are in big trouble.
Yeah, because like I said, this is what we can't protect from. This is what we can't see coming. Random person decides to carry out something, and it's not like, someone has to go buy a bunch of fertilizer to build a bomb, and it kind of causes a red flag. No. This is a guy with a pickup truck he rented off Turo, going down a busy street and killing a bunch of people. Yeah. You can't stop that. And so the West, to stop somebody from legally purchasing, weapons and going into a shopping mall, a restaurant, to do random attacks that cause chaos and insecurity in regular places where people go, to where everyone is now afraid. That is what they want. That is what they want. And that is what we, as, the intelligent community, we can't, it's hard to see that coming. It's hard to know it's that guy, and we got to go stop that guy before he does this thing. It's just hard to do. And so, we know we know that we have been really, really blessed that it hasn't gotten to the level where some people think it could get to,
Yeah.
And so, oh man, you were saying something that had triggered something. About the West. This is the other part about the West that's kind of driving this. And England is a big part of it. The West has been taught to hate itself.
Yes.
It has been taught to hate its own culture.
Yes.
It has been taught to hate its history. And everyone wants to apologize to the rest of the world for that history. And so instead of saying, I'm proud to be British, I'm proud to be an American, they're not proud. They're ashamed because they think that we have this horrible past colonial history that we need to make up for. And the way you make up for that is you kind of play second fiddle to the rest of the world. You play second fiddle to the Muslim culture that comes in, because who are you to invoke your culture on them, right? And so you let them bring their culture in. Like, that is just suicide. It's cultural, national suicide. And the response we're seeing from that is what we would call the woke right, or the very far right, who are now saying, and unfortunately they're racializing it because that's how they see it, is, oh, you're trying to destroy our white heritage and white identity by bringing in these people who hate us and want to take over and bring their culture in and displace ours. And so now you're causing this fight between two factions because you're too cowardly to stand up and understand that you can't import people from a completely different culture and then drop them in your backyard and think that everything's going to be hunky-dory. Right. And that's no way to apologize to the rest of the world or make up for any kind of historical wrongs. And it's complete self-hate. Yes. And that's what's really allowing a lot of this to happen.
100% agree. 100% agree. So well said. The self-hate that has been taught. It's why I so vehemently oppose DEI, because it is so just absolutely saturated, completely marinated with critical race theory. And critical race theory, the adherents of critical race theory almost always tend to be anti-white. Whether they are white or not. It blows my mind when I hear a white person say some of the things that come out of the CRT, and DEI camp, because it is racist against white people. And I'm thinking to myself, how did they talk you into saying this?
That even if you don't believe you're racist, you are inherently racist simply because you're white.
Right.
and they walk around believing this.
It's madness. It's absolute madness. And so I think one of the things that I hope people wake up from, but not in the way that we're seeing on the woke right, because we are seeing a wave, and we'll have to deal with it. This is worth an entire episode. We're seeing a wave of white racial, identity politics coming up because white people, I mean, quite honestly, we as a culture, they've been told, and you have some people who grew up in this culture, because it's been going on. This has been going on since, in my opinion, since shortly after, it really kicked a fever pitch shortly after Obama became president. I know I'm going to make some people mad by saying that, but I noticed the rhetoric dramatically change especially after his first term. And it's statistically been proven that the language that was used
2012.
around these things, 2012, a hockey stick jump, especially in the mainstream media. And so it happened in academia, it happened in the mainstream media, and I think one preceded the other. I think it happened in academia first.
It did.
But you had people who grew up listening to this. And so imagine being a young white kid being told that you're racist just because you exist as a white person. This is the stuff that we fought against as black people, having something, being labeled, being categorized, etc., your character being determined purely because of the color of your skin. That's what we did to this young generation.
Yeah, and I want to say something too, because I want to tie this together with the jihadist stuff, because people are always confused in terms of how is it that people on the progressive left can side with these kind of jihadist Muslims when it seems like they disagree with everything they hold to, right? They don't believe in women's rights and all this type of stuff, right? But what draws them together is they both hate the West.
Yes, that's it.
You know,
That's it.
So the pro-black nationalist, the white progressive, the jihadist guy that drives his truck down Bourbon Street all believes that the great evil in the world is the West. It is the oppressive West. And so that draws them together. And when you have a Marxist worldview of oppressor oppressed, then you always take the side of the oppressed. And then when you believe that these Muslim groups, these brown people are always the oppressed one, and anything they do is an act of liberation, yeah, you can go out and march after October 7th. You can go out and march after the Bourbon Street attack. You can be like Ta-Nehisi Coates and celebrate and say you didn't feel anything on 9/11, you know? Because that's what draws you. You believe that, just like they believe that America is the great Satan. And and so that's what draws them together, is their common hatred of Western society and Western culture. And so that's I hope people draw those two things and kind of understand where this kind of intersects. It's all about hatred of the West.
100%. Yeah. Thanks for tying that together. You know, the larger point is essentially, what we were saying before. What you see happen in the UK, that's the same mentality. It's the same mentality as what has been prevalent. That is wokeness, and that is what happens. And so I think that my hope is that we can wake up and we can get it right. That we don't turn this into a pendulum swing back towards white nationalism. That because you see some people going in that direction. I think that if enough people get up and have level heads about this, that we can avoid that really becoming a thing. But yeah, just excellent guest. I hope that lots of people watch this and come to understand Islam a little bit better, because that's the real Islam.
Yeah. That's what I hope too. Just understand why these attacks happen and what's driving them, So do you want to move on, or do you want to wrap up? We've been going an hour and a half.
So we've got some other things here that I think especially in light of what we were just talking about.
I was thinking about that. Yeah.
With white nationalism starting to be on the rise. I think this next thing.
It ties in great. It does. All right. So, if you guys haven't noticed in the news, there's been this fight over what's called H-1B visas, right? And so, H-1B visas are visas that allow foreigners to come in. It's basically work visas. And so, since the election, this has been brought up as an issue that some on the right want the Trump administration to basically cut off. And so, if you can play the Fox News video, and then because he lays it out very good, kind of what the issue is, and then we can kind of dive into it.
Absolutely.
President-elect Trump supporting Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy after the two backed H-1B visas for foreign workers, telling the New York Post, quote, "I've always liked the visas. I've always been in favor of the visas. That's why we have them. I have many H-1B visas on my properties. I've been a believer in H-1B. I've used it many times. It's a great program. Our next guest, though, is not sold on Trump's claims. Joining us now is American Majority founder and CEO Ned Ryan. Wow, a lot of confusion around this because, as you know, Ned, first of all, welcome and Happy New Year. As you know, Donald Trump had a lot of criticisms for this program and said there were a lot of abuses of it. Elon Musk has now come out, Vivek Ramaswamy, and now Donald Trump told the New York Post this. So what is your take?
Well, my take is the entire conversation started around increasing the number of H-1B visas, which was precisely the wrong place to start a conversation and expanding what is a broken and abused system. And I think a lot of people can acknowledge the H-1B visa system is broken. It's been abused. Elon posted some things last night that I think would be a nice starting point, that you have to significantly raise the minimum salary and then add an annual cost to these H-1B visas to maintain them. I think we have to get to the point, Rachel, where we make it prohibitively expensive to have an H-1B visa to really focus on having those truly exceptional people come in and use them. But Rachel, I think the thing has to be the thing that has to be discussed is the fundamental issues around this whole entire debate. Is that America fundamentally is not an economic zone. We're not some global storefront. Americans should not be treated as second-class citizens in their own country because federal policy allows billion-dollar corporations to hire foreign workers at under-market wages instead of paying American workers full wages. So if we can start to frame the conversation that way and understand the system is broken, it needs to be reformed, and the American people should actually be prioritized in all things, that really is the message of America first.
Yeah, and that's always been Donald Trump's message, which is, I think, why some people are a little confused by that statement.
Well, I think probably what's truly indicative of where Donald Trump's second term will go on this is the fact that you have Stephen Miller in the White House, and he will be dealing with some of these issues like the H-1B visas. I think Stephen Miller has made it very clear how he feels about H-1B visas. The system has been abused. There is need for reform. And I think you actually, the starting point in the conversation with H-1B visas is how do you actually reduce the number to truly bring in those that are exceptional and not let it be abused. So I feel pretty confident that Stephen Miller and his reform ideas on H-1B visas will truly be what will happen in the second term.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would think it was a good idea to not allow another Elon Musk into the country. We obviously want the brightest people
Correct.
to come here.
Truly exceptional.
Truly
Yes.
exceptional people, of course. But we have, thousands of people doing coding jobs. And I know a lot of Americans who would love for their sons and daughters to have those jobs.
I think one of the things that's been insinuated in this debate is that somehow Americans are mediocre. I would
Yes.
firmly push back on that. I think our school system has seriously not served the American people well. It has become indoctrination centers at all levels. Instead of emphasizing STEM, those things will actually benefit us in regards to these high-tech jobs. So I think it's not mediocrity. I think we've been abused by our school system, and there's a significant need for reform. They should not be indoctrination centers. We should actually be emphasizing these things that will actually help us in these sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. And importing workers to fill these jobs is not going to do anything to fix the system. It's going to hide this. It's going to prevent us from
Exactly.
dealing with
It's
the
a
root
Band-Aid.
cause of it. Absolutely. And I will add this too, Ned. It is our school system. You're absolutely right about that. It has failed our students, and hopefully Donald Trump will
Correct.
do something through the education department to start fixing that, school choice, all that. But there is a family component of this as well, and a lot of children have been failed at home, in broken homes. And,
Yes.
when you hear Vivek Ramaswamy talk about sort of the cultural values that are coming, say, from, East Indian American families and so forth, those are families that are intact. Those are families that are focused. I'll give you the last word on that.
Well, I do think that we need to challenge the generations behind us, our children and those behind them, to actually to set goals to exceed
Yes.
what they think that is possible. So I think we have kind of had that we've set low expectations. I think we need to encourage our younger people to actually set higher goals, and I think we need to reform the school system. So I think there's a whole host of things, but you're right. When we have things like H-1B visa that has been abused, it's a Band-Aid over the problem. It is not the real solution.
Yeah, I love that we're having this debate. It's important.
I do
Ned
too,
Ryan,
actually.
Yeah, And I'm glad we had you on. Thank you, Ned.
Thanks, Rachel.
You got it.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
So, yeah, interesting. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the matter, Sir Briggins.
I like the way he laid it out. It was very okay. That makes sense. You believe that companies are using this visa program to bring in workers at lower wages instead of hiring Americans to do those jobs. They're basically bringing in foreign workers to work at a discount. Yes, to me that is a problem. But at the end, they also kind of told on themselves, because there is an issue with the American worker. There is an issue with having enough people who are qualified to work, because this is mainly an issue in the tech industry, right? So this is where people are really raising this in the tech industry, because you're bringing in all these Indians and stuff like that. Well, if there is a problem, why are you making the issue about H-1B? If there is an issue with the amount and quality of American workers, because they're making it seem like it's all of these people with engineering degrees working at Starbucks. Now, I hadn't seen that. I hadn't seen a crisis of unemployed engineers. But that's kind of the argument they're trying to make, and I just don't think it's holding water. Because you can't make it about the H-1B visa program and then come at the end and say, well, we do have an issue with the quality of our education system, our broken homes, and the way people, a lack of people that are focused on STEM. Well, if you have that problem, why are you blaming the visa program?
Yep. No, okay, so that's good, man, because I saw the same whole, I think of it as a businessman as well. So, I'm an American, I'm a businessman. I've worked at corporations, I've worked in a number of places, had at some of these companies, had a lot of Indian colleagues, at other companies not. And, I knew when we had a lot of Indian colleagues, the company generally was trying to save money. The question was, have those people been brought into the country if they're here on an H-1B? And I know that there's another one called an EB-2, which is, that's the one they say is like a really exceptional person.
Exceptional, yeah.
But an H-1B, the thing that gets me about this debate is that an H-1B is not cheap. It is not inexpensive. That's the thing that kills me, is they keep talking about the H-1B program like you could just get a bunch of people. You just get a bunch of people over here and pay them like, dirt cheap wages. The Indian designers and engineers that I know of, they were not working for dirt cheap. Those people were paid pretty well.
No, and that's the thing. That's another thing I want to bring up. Indian Americans are the #1 income earners in the U.S.
Yes.
So they clearly aren't coming over here and working for $40K.
No,
right.
No, and it actually is a great expense on the company to bring them here. It is not a cheap process to get them into the U.S. legally. I worked at a company where we wound up having to they wound up having to send somebody back because they couldn't get that stuff justified. The guy was good. The guy was good at what he did. He wasn't a bad worker, but they couldn't work it out. He wound up having to go back to India. He was on my team. He was on a project team that I was leading, and I lost a team member because he had to go back to India and other places. We had to turn people down. They wanted to be able to gain legal status. They wanted to be able to stay in the U.S. They had legal status for a certain amount of time, and they wanted us to bring them in on an H-1B visa. And we're like, we can't. It's too expensive. We can't justify it. H-1Bs aren't cheap.
Yeah.
Maybe for the biggest corporations, maybe they're cheap. Maybe it's cheap to them. But for the average American business, for a startup, heck no. No, it's not. That is not a cheap option. So it's just a little bit crazy to me when I hear people make this argument that it's a cheap labor program. I've never known it to be a cheap labor program.
No.
So, and maybe I'm ignorant. Maybe somebody can come and educate me on that. But I've never known the H-1B program to be cheap. And I think that the other problem with the argument that he's making, in my opinion, is he's making a protectionist argument. He's making a protectionist argument. And that is, I'll put my cards on the table. That is the part of MAGA that I disagree with. I disagree with protectionism. I think that a free market says the best people get the most value. So, if there is an issue in the labor market where American workers are so expensive that the value that they bring does not dramatically warrant the cost, then you're going to see people engage in behavior where they try to get labor less expensively. Again, I don't necessarily think that the H-1B program is that. If we're talking about in tech, I really don't think it is. But if we're gonna say that we're about being the best, if our schools are failing us, don't blame the business that has to get stuff done right now. The business has to get stuff done now. The business can't wait for school reform. The business has to get things done now to survive. And so if you're gonna go and you're gonna make a protectionist move and put handcuffs on businesses and say, nope, you can't bring in foreign workers to do some of these jobs. It's like, okay, are you saying we've got all the qualified people that we need? Because many years ago, before we wound up having some of the crazy swings that we saw in the employment market with COVID, engineers were always at a premium. I have a software design background. Good designers always came at a premium, and they were in short supply. So it wasn't like America was just teeming with engineers. That we had tons of engineer jobs, and anybody who wanted one, we had tons of engineers, and anybody who wants to get an engineer can get an American engineer and didn't have to worry about anything. No, there were many years where you were trying to get somebody qualified, and you had to kiss a lot of frogs, man, to get somebody who was qualified. And I'm not saying that everybody from overseas is qualified, because I've worked with people overseas where there's a big cultural difference. There's a big cultural difference in how we do things. And you try to get that right fit. I've never seen it to where a bunch of Americans were getting screwed over. I've always seen it to where we have had to sift through mess, whether foreign or domestic, in order to get great candidates. And so this idea that H-1B is destroying America is absolutely ridiculous to me, based on my experience in the tech industry.
Yeah. So in in academia, we have what's called J-1 visas. And so these are foreign students that are coming over for training and education. And academia is heavily reliant on these J-1 visa students. And this is why, because I work in research, and research is usually done at the graduate and the doctorate level, not the undergrad level, right? American students are getting their bachelor's degrees in engineering and going and trying to find a job. The foreign students are staying for their master's and a lot of times their doctorate before they're leaving school. And so our PhD programs are filled with Indian and Chinese and Iranian students, right? Not Americans. Now, we do have some Americans, but there's a desperate need for more. And we are finding out it's hard to get these kids to stay in school, because when you get a bachelor's degree in engineering, you can go out and get a 6-figure job.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're going and doing it. right?
Yep.
But if you talk about an American student coming out of school versus a foreign student that's coming out of school that's on a visa program, that foreign student has got a master's or a PhD. And so it's just a different level of product that is coming out of the education system. And so, yeah, it's just, I don't think people really understand the difference. And so Vivek had a tweet that got a lot of people upset, a lot of people. And I think he was spitting. I think he was preaching, but some people were upset. And we can talk about, do we really have a reason to be upset? Because he said some things that were pretty inflammatory.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the tweet here. Okay, so I'm gonna read some of this here.
Yeah, you got to read it because I can't see it.
Yeah. So the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, a lazy and wrong explanation. I appreciate that. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in college. It starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. A culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World or Zach and Slater over Screech in Saved by the Bell or Stefan over Steve Urkel in Family Matters will not produce the best engineers. Fact, I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who actively limited how much their kids could watch those TV shows precisely because they promoted mediocrity, and their kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. More movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends. More math tutoring, fewer sleepovers. More weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons. More books, less TV. More creating, less chilling. More extracurriculars, less hanging out at the mall. Most normal American parents look skeptically at those kinds of parents. More normal American kids view those kinds of kids with scorn. If you grow up aspiring to normalcy, normalcy is what you will achieve. Now close your eyes and visualize which families you knew in the 90s or even now who raised their kids according to one model versus the other. Be brutally honest. Normalcy doesn't cut it in a hyper-competitive global market for technical talent. And if we pretend like it does, we will have our asses handed to us by China. This can be our Sputnik moment. We've awakened from slumber before, and we can do it again. Trump's election hopefully marks the beginning of a new golden era in America, but only if our culture fully wakes up. A culture that once again prioritizes achievement over normalcy, excellence over mediocrity, nerdiness over conformity, hard work over laziness. That's the work we have cut out for us rather than wallowing in victimhood and just wishing or legislating alternative hiring practices into existence. I'm confident we can do it. And of course, people had hands for him in the comments.
He was spitting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think that this exchange actually between Vivek and Cernovich here, he said the Woodstock generation managed to build out aerospace. The one before went to the moon. America was doing great. Underlying your post is that we were all living in squalor until being rescued by H-1Bs. Then why did everyone want to come here? That version of America, the one that used to embody unbridled exceptionalism, is exactly what we want to return to. That's a point about culture, not immigration policy. Yeah, so I think that Vivek's response is the right response. to that, because I knew that's what somebody was going to come back with. It was basically like, oh, you saying before immigrants we couldn't do nothing.
Yeah, that's not what he's saying. Yeah,
that is not what he's saying. Like he is saying that there is a culture issue, and I've seen it, man. I've seen it. I have been, I've been on the board of a school, and I watched the difference in culture. The immigrant families who had their children in this school, they were hardcore, man. They were hardcore, and they were trying to produce. They were trying to produce Ivy League students who got, crazy high SAT scores, et cetera. Now, I will say that that culture is not perfect. I think that I saw problems with that culture for sure, and I grew up around some of that culture. I went to an IB school. I was not in the IB program, but I took some IB classes. Had a lot of friends in the IB program. And I saw the difference in what their parents were requiring of them and what my parents were requiring of me. And that's not to throw shade at my parents or their parents.
Yeah.
I will just say that there's the academician, the idea that your life revolves around getting a certain score on the SAT isn't always going to produce the best and brightest. And there are a lot of entrepreneur stories that will bear that out, but there is a cultural issue where we tend to shy away from achievement, and I do think that a leftward drift, personally, that kind of has a skeptical attitude towards achievement in America is partially to blame. I'm not saying that it's just on the left, but I will say that there is more of a skeptical attitude towards achievement like that, and I hate that I'm starting to see that from the right. I hate that.
Yeah. Future, thanks for stopping by. I was wondering where you were, but yeah, you have a blessed 2025 as well. So I also went to a school that was co-located with an IB school, right? My high school. And we were co-located in one building, but they kind of had a special wing of the building for all the IB students and classes. But we also did all the extracurriculars together. So they played on our basketball team, our football team. So we had cross friends, right? There was this one girl, and black girl. Her dad was a doctor, and she was an IB student. She's in the gifted part. And we had 4 classes a semester, and then 4 classes the next semester, so a total of 8 for the year. They had 6 each semester, right? So she had 6 classes, and she had all A's. So she had a 90 in one class, and her dad told her she was slipping. And I'm like, with my C's on my... She had straight A's, and he's like, you slipping. Right?
Man.
That's a different level of parenting. That's a different level of expectation, right? And she agreed. She's like, yeah, I was playing around, And so, that was a standard that was expected to be upheld, and she was held to it. And there was another case, and I think this is crazy too, because we're talking about highly melanated people. So that girl was, we're talking about Indian Americans or Indians. And now I'm going to bring Nigerians into the
Nigerians.
equation,
I was about to say, you got to bring up the Nigerians. They are hardcore.
Yeah, they have a very similar culture, and they get the very similar results. This one girl was telling a story of she got her PhD, and when she graduated, that was the very first graduation her parents attended. And her dad said, because now you've achieved something, everything else was just expected. They didn't come to her high school graduation. They didn't come to her bachelor graduation. They didn't come when she got her master's. They only showed up when she finished her doctorate. And they said, now you've accomplished something. Nothing else was to be celebrated. Right? Yeah.
See, and that's when I say that culture is not perfect, man. The culture's
It's
not perfect because you
perfect.
got some people coming out of that. They got scars from that, man.
They do. But when we're talking about, but he's talking about producing excellence. He's talking about producing the best engineers, the best at this. If you want to be a culture that produces that, it's gonna take a different mentality.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a different, like you say, less time at the mall and less chilling, and you're gonna be more time studying. I've used this example so many times to talk about the difference in culture, right? If you have one culture that values sports and they spend 1,000 hours a year dribbling a basketball, and you have another culture that values math and science, and they spend 1,000 hours, studying math and science, do we think those outcomes of those two cultures are going to be the same in those areas? The answer is completely not. And so we look at Asians and we like, man, they're just so smart. They're so much smarter than us. And we neglect how much effort and work they actually put in, right? We think they're just studying for an hour and just going and goofing off, and they're just so smart. Like, no. Their interests are different. They're spending more time in it. They're spending less time, watching TV, and they're actually putting the work in. But like you say, that culture is not perfect. There's some downside to that. There's the expectations to be perfect. There's the expectations to achieve, and strict parental expectations that really put a pressure on kids to achieve. But at the end of the day, they do. And that's what he's saying. I think there is a middle ground that can be healthier. But at the same time, we have to change what we're currently doing if we want to change what we're producing. And that's the argument he's making. I 100% agree with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he's making the right point on we have to aim for exceptionalism again. We have to look at exceptionalism as the thing that we want. When we think about, I love that you brought up, the dribbling for, dribbling for 1,000 hours. I think about MJ. I think about Kobe. You think about American exceptionalism, and being willing to put in the work. And I think that we have to think about what we really want as a society, because I'm sorry, but I just think that the other side of this immigration argument is not saying we're going to win because we're the best. They're going to say, I want Americans to have the jobs because they're Americans. And
Yep.
I have a problem with that. Because
we want our own DEI program.
I'm like, dude, are we going to win because we're the best? Or are we going to, that's, you can't have it both ways. And so,
Nope.
I think Vivek is right. We have a culture problem. And unfortunately, that culture problem has seeped into the right. And so I am a big proponent of saying, yo, be the next MJ, be the next Kobe, be the next, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name. Well, I'll say Steph.
No.
Be the next Steph. Be the next the next Steve Jobs. Be the next Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Like Steve Jobs wasn't like crazy academician, but Steve Jobs was crazy focused on achieving excellence with products, and he was willing to go, to crazy lengths to get to that level. And so you just don't get that level of excellence without being willing to not be normal. The thing that runs through with Steph, if you hear about Steph's training program, some of the stuff that Steph has done over his career, they talk about he gets these strobe visors that they use in the military, and he puts it over his eyes so it flashes a strobe in his eyes to start to overload his brain. He dribbles a ball and has somebody throw him a tennis ball all while this is going on. So his brain gets used to that level of just crazy overstimulation. so that whatever's happening in that arena is nothing compared to what he put himself through in the gym. It's nothing compared to what he put himself through. That's not
And what's
normal.
crazy is that it's not normal, but it's the thing. In our culture, we're more willing to do that when it comes to athletics than we are academics. And that's the problem. That's what Vivek is saying.
100%.
Right? Yes, take that mindset. But if you want to produce the best engineers, the goal, you shouldn't shy away from foreign competition.
No.
No, you should get better.
Yeah.
That would be like the NBA saying, you know what, all of our best players right now are foreign born. So let's not bring in any more foreign players. We're just gonna have American players in the NBA. That's exactly what they're arguing for.
Somebody going to start another league, and it's going to be more interesting to watch if that were to ever happen.
Exactly, and that's what he means. Like, if you don't let them in the United States, they're just going to go to China.
Right.
You're going to have the best and brightest going to China instead of here.
Yep.
That's the problem.
Russia would love to have them. China would love to have them. Right.
Yes.
We want those people coming here. You want to have a good solution. In my opinion, the solution needs to be, if you come here on one of those, there is a length of time that you have to work here. You got to pay taxes here.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, I'm not for income tax. I'm for sales tax, but you know what I'm saying. I'm for consumption
That's
tax.
another episode.
Yeah, it's a whole other episode. But so just so nobody gets it twisted, I'm not for income tax. But we have to put stipulations so that it does benefit our country. We can't just be raising up the best and brightest and then shipping them back to their country. I think that future, you'll get that YouTube, that strobe visor, so you can get better at watching YouTube videos. Hey, we gotta seek excellence in some area. Somebody's got to be exceptional at watching YouTube videos. We appreciate you. But you're absolutely right. We have to have that attitude of exceptionalism in areas outside of athletics, because we tend to glorify it in athletics. We don't tend to glorify it when it comes to stuff like engineering, when it comes to things that are more nerdy. When I was in high school, your boy wasn't on an athletic team. I was on the computer team. That's lame, super lame. The girls weren't trying to talk to me. The girl weren't trying to talk to me. They wanted to talk to the basketball player, etc. But me being on computer team, as far as my career, paid off way more than me being on the basketball team or whatever.
I was on the basketball team and I didn't make the NBA, so it didn't pay off. So,
man, you were robbed, man. You were robbed, Kevin. But yeah, man, I think that you're absolutely right. Like, we've got to take that attitude and be able to apply that to academics and to make it cool to do that stuff and to be exceptional, and to not expect something just because we're Americans. I mean, I hate to say that, but we don't. Nobody owes us anything. America doesn't owe you anything. America is about being the best. In America, the reason that it's the land of opportunity is because if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to be exceptional, you can make it here no matter who you are or where you came from. That's what makes America great. Mm-hmm. And that we have certain beliefs that allow for that to happen. Shout out to, Christian worldview being behind the Constitution. Just saying. But that's what makes America great. This protectionism stuff, that doesn't make America great. If we talk about making America great again, protectionism ain't going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so we have one more response on this topic. It's what I call the woke right response, because this guy is definitely woke right. I had to stop following him because I was like, it just got bad, and I was like,
yeah, why
am I following this guy? I'm mad at everything he posts. And so, I want to bring up his response to this H-1B visa. And he starts off making some of the same similar arguments about lower wages and stuff, but then he takes it in a completely different direction.
Yeah,
so let's talk about it.
I'm gonna see if I
All
can make
right.
this a little bigger on the screen, but I'll read it still. So he says we are arguing. Actually, we need to read what Michaela said, because I think Michaela Peterson, she nails
Okay.
it, right? She nails it.
Yeah.
Michaela says, why'd the woke right pretend it was illegal immigration they were against when it turned out it was immigration in general? Boom, boom. At least be
Yep.
honest about it. If there's assimilation into the culture and legal immigration, what is the problem other than skin color? Called it. I love that she pointed out assimilation, because assimilation is very important. It's extremely important.
Yep.
We do want people to assimilate into American culture, into our values, our belief system. That is extremely important. Otherwise, you get the UK, you get Europe. We want them to assimilate to American culture. And there was a time in America where it was not cool to not love America. We need to get back to that. But let's talk about this guy. So he says we're arguing two completely different things. Trump appears to be deflecting or isn't well informed on the national debate. Tech bros are intentionally, that right there, that's leftist language.
Tech
Just gonna say
bros.
that. That's leftist language. Tech bros are intentionally trying to misrepresent our argument too, gaslighting us. We are against the current abuse of the H-1B program that drives down wages and discriminates against American hires for entry-level jobs. This isn't the best and brightest. That's an EB-2 visa. They're trying to conflate the two to confuse the average American who wants top talent in our country. Plus, this is a discussion on the impact of Indian culture. Oh, there it is. On the American economy and our cities. As countless stories are of anti-white hiring practices that only favor Indians or more H-1Bs they can treat as slave labor. Wow, okay. Often replacing competent Americans or Western immigrants with a more subservient underclass they can control. Plus, we've seen how poorly this kind of immigration affected the UK, Canada, and Australia, and are having a real discussion on if we want this same problem in our country at a larger scale than it already is. This is both a discussion on our Western identity and an argument against white replacement, there it is, in our homelands, that has led to a culture that discriminates openly against white families whose ancestors founded this country. This isn't trolling, racism, or any of the other stupid accusations. Many of us are tired of sacrificing our culture, identity, and safety in the name of diversity and growing the GDP to make some tech owners rich in the process. Sounds like a Bernie bro, just saying. We aren't against Western people like Musk coming to our nation to help build it up, but demographic replacement with Easterners will have many political and cultural consequences that we have the right to be concerned about. Threatening us and censoring us for bringing up these concerns was why we voted for Trump to begin with in 2016, and so it's insulting for Vivek and others to treat us like the left has for the last 8 years, like we are some deplorable scum, also known as subtards. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. All right, okay, and you responded to him, H-1Bs aren't costing us our culture. You're making an issue out of something that's not. Amen.
Yes. Yeah, because has anyone heard of the epidemic of Indian culture invading America?
No.
Has anyone heard? Has anyone been aware of the nimbusing Indian culture that is just taking over and replacing white people? But this is the thing. H-1B visas aren't millions of people, but it's not like illegal immigration where people are flooding into the country.
Right.
We're talking like 80,000 a year. And we're talking about, we have a country of 350 million people, and we're talking about 80,000 H-1B visas. And he's talking about replacement. It makes no sense. It's complete foolishness. It's ignorance. Whatever other pejorative word I can think of, it just makes no sense. This is not an issue. They're making something an issue that is not an issue. Indians coming to America is not any kind of detriment to Western culture. Like Michaela Peterson said, just say you're against immigration and let that be it. Outside of, like she said, skin color. He said Western is okay, right? But Easterners not. You know, it's like, that's just dumb. That's just dumb. Especially when you're talking about treating, because we're not talking, because he mentions like this done in Europe, and we're not talking about Muslims. No. We're not talking about bringing in Islam in mass droves of refugees. That's not what's going on. We're talking about Indian engineers into the tech industry. That is not taking over American culture and American values, and because most of the time they exhibit those values.
Right. That's the crazy thing, is that they have a meritocratic attitude. Like, they tend to bring a meritocratic attitude. That's why those Indian parents are so hardcore. They have a meritocratic attitude. They tend to have very strong family units, something that we desperately need to revive in the West. It is happening across white and black. We have decreasing numbers of intact family units, and these people actually have intact family units. I'm saying if they're willing to assimilate, to adopt the fundamental principles, I'm just saying that they're not destroying American culture. I'm sorry. The boogeyman is not the Indian people. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm going to represent their viewpoint, because this is where they're coming from. They don't believe America is a set of ideas. They believe there's something inherent to, I'm going to say, white Protestant heritage, right? Which founded America. They believe there's something innate to that. So when someone doesn't come from that background or that culture, they don't believe that they can just adopt our culture, right? Or Western culture, right? And so they view it as more than just, oh, you adopted American ideas. A great example of that is, what's her name? If I hadn't lost, what is that lady name? She told Vivek that she couldn't, Ann Coulter. So Ann Coulter was talking to Vivek, right? Yes. And she told him, she said, look, I agree with you like 95% of the time, but I couldn't vote for you. And the reason she couldn't vote for him, because she said he's not a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Right. So even though he holds all the ideas of America's values, even though he says the things, even though she agrees with him, she can't vote for him because she believes that there's something inherent to white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism that is key to America, and that at any time he could turn to his Hindu roots, right, and abandon the Western, you know.
Yeah.
And so there's this distrust to anybody who doesn't fit the mold, right? And so that's where this guy's coming from. It's not how Indians display American values, is that they don't come from the right heritage. And so there's no guarantee that even if they do now, that they'll continue to, right? So the future of America and the future of the West depends on white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Now, I will give a caveat, because there's another guy on this side of the aisle who does not limit it to white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. He has this term called heritage Americans, where he include African Americans, he include immigrants who came up in the Ellis Island generation, right? So basically, if your family has been here for generations, you're adopted in, you're good, you know. But somebody that comes from Nigeria is not, right? And they even said, they even believe like Indians need to go back, because there's something inherently that they don't have about our history and culture. And it's just a very, very convoluted thing. But that's where this guy's coming from. So where you and I would view America as the ideals of America, embracing what America stands for, they view it as something deeper than that. And so there's a race element to it, there's a culture element to it, and that's what I'm talking about. And that's why it doesn't make sense to us, because he's not talking about just kind of believing in the Constitution. It's deeper than that. So
yeah, that I picked that up off of what he was saying as well. It is evident that he believes there is something else, like you said, that is just kind of inherent in you, growing up here, being born here, whatever, being here for generations, that makes you different. But I'm sorry, when I see people from other countries who come here, I have immigrant friends. I have a couple of immigrant friends from the UK. One from Germany who just recently became a citizen. Of those three friends, I knew them before they were citizens. Those guys love America. Those guys came here because they love America.
Yeah.
They love American ideas. They want to be Americans. And I know that this guy would say, "Oh, well, those guys are Western. They're Western immigrants, so they're okay." But what I'll just say, when I see a Mexican guy fly an American flag, when I see a Mexican guy fly an American flag on Independence Day, who that dude barely speaks English, but he's sending a message. This is what I believe in. I'll take 10 of those. I'll take 10 of those.
Absolutely.
For every person who doesn't understand that America is a nation that is born out of an idea. It's not blood and soil. It is not. You don't magically become okay for having been here for generations. That doesn't magically make you okay. And I think this is a dangerous ideology that's springing up on the right. It's dangerous.
It is. Do you? I know you're not from the South or Alabama. Do you know who George Wallace was? So
I know the name, but I don't remember a lot about him.
I figured. So I mean, I'm from Alabama.
I'm from South Carolina, so I'm from the South technically, but I'm not.
But you also moved around a little bit.
I moved around a lot. Yeah. So
George Wallace was the governor of Alabama back in the segregation days, in the Jim Crow days. And he would say, "I'm not a racist. A racist is someone who hates someone because of the color of their skin." He says, "I'm a segregationist. I just believe it's better for whites and blacks if we're separate." Right. And so it was like, I don't have any ill will towards black people. They just need to stay over there. That's kind of the position this new woke right is taking. Right. They would say, "I'm not a racist. I don't have any ill will towards these people. I wish them well. They just need to stay in their own country. They're just segregationists." Right. That's all they are. And so they're trying to claim this. This is not the moral high ground they think they are. They're basically just George Wallace, And so, and so that's what he's saying. And to a degree, he's right. They don't have any ill will towards these people in terms of a racist mindset. They just believe they need to stay with their own kind. They need to stay over there, right? And so
that's it. Those are the arguments that I'm kind of seeing. Is like, oh, they need to stay in their own country. They need to stay with their culture. And I'm like, dude, that you missed the point of what makes America great.
And it's the thing. And I say this as someone who does not agree or believe in multiculturalism. Not one bit. Right? No. But if somebody's willing to come over here and embrace and assimilate and provide value, absolutely, come on.
100%.
Come on.
Matt, I love your comment. You said your best customer who pays many of my bills can't go from a worker card to become a citizen for another 8 years. He owns a business and employs 6 guys. It's insane. He loves America. Says he's more American than most Americans.
Word. Yeah, that's what you find. Man, I have friends who got their green cards and they threw a party because it meant that much to them that they were able to become U.S. persons. I know other people who, become U.S. citizens or U.S. persons, and I mean, they're in tears. They love America, right? And they come from countries where, they don't have the same freedoms, and so they value what America stands for. They value America's principles, right? And they hold them dear, and they will fly the flag because that is what it has nothing to do with their heritage and their skin color or anything like that. It is, do you embrace the values by which this country was founded?
Yes.
And if you do, welcome aboard.
Yes.
That's it. But these guys are trying to make it, like you say, blood and soul, and that ain't got nothing to do with it.
Ain't got nothing to do with it. And you know, I will say, this is what we were talking about earlier. This comes from, I won't say it completely comes from, but
it's a reaction too.
It's a reaction to. It's massively fueled by years, more than 10 years of it not being okay to be white. Straight up. Like, it just was not okay to be white. If you were white, if you didn't hate the fact that you were white, you weren't okay. I watched it happen in the workplace. You had to be falling all over yourself to apologize to every other ethnicity. I had a coworker, blew my mind. She said this, man.
It's got to be so cringe.
Oh man, it's mad cringe, super cringe. We're standing around at work, and we're talking. She's pregnant. She's white, and we're asking her, hey, so do you know what you're having? She's like, oh yeah, it's a boy. And she's like, I know, another white male. And I'm like,
oh,
dude, like that's your son.
Horrible.
That's your son.
Horrible. But that's what they're breeding in them. That's what they're putting in their head.
And that's what dudes.
That's a bad thing.
Dudes like Elijah. That's what dudes like Elijah. They broke, man. They broke under that stuff. And they went to the dark side. They went to the dark side, man.
Yeah.
I'm not making excuses for him being on the dark side. I'm just saying that it wasn't in a vacuum.
Nope.
It didn't happen in a vacuum.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And one of the things we've tried to do is warn people on that side. Don't take the bait. I get why it's tempting. Don't do it. Don't become what you hate.
Yes.
Because you're just becoming the polar opposite of what it was. Like, you're just embracing the same ideas. It's like a black person that's supposed to hate racism and discrimination, but then become very, very pro racism and discrimination against white people. It's like, no, you're supposed to stick to the principle. The principles of right and wrong is what you're supposed to be standing for. Not just, it's okay when it's in my favor, or I want to use it as a weapon when I have the power. Like, right. No, if discrimination based on skin color is wrong, then it's wrong. Period. Right. You don't, and so that's kind of how this is. It's like, if, same thing. If they don't want to be discriminated against, then don't discriminate against other people. Like, it's just stick to the principles of things and stop losing your moral ground based on you reacting to someone attacking you. And so it's just pragmatism. You're right. Oh, it's bad to be white. Okay, I'm gonna be being white the proudest thing ever. I'm gonna be so white. I'm just gonna disappear. Like, I'm gonna be white so hard. Like, just stop. I thought we were like not supposed to be putting an emphasis on black, white, whatever, right?
Right.
I thought we were supposed to be seeing each other as human beings, as countrymen. Like, don't just go to the other side of identity politics and embrace it. No, we're supposed to be getting rid of it.
Right.
But we see what's happening.
And so I say that it's incumbent upon all of us who see this for the problem that it is to say something. Kevin and I out here in these YouTube streets, and elsewhere, just calling balls and strikes. You have to have a principle by which to judge right and wrong, and that is the way that you avoid going to the dark side. For us, we are believers. I think it's for everybody. That is what guides us. It's not based on your skin color. And the Constitution doesn't care about your skin color. The Constitution cares about whether you are going to treat every person as though they are born with inalienable rights. And so I think that you have to look at that, and you can't waver. You can't decide all of a sudden that it's blood and soil when you start seeing a bunch of immigrants coming over. You can't decide that it's blood and soil. If we're about being the best, we gotta be able to admit when we are not the best. We gotta be able to admit that. I still think, and my experience in the workplace bears this out, the freedom of thought and some of the cultural norms in America, it tends to be the one. It's the culture that creates the outliers. It's very hard to be an outlier in Indian culture. It's hard to be an outlier. It's very hard to be an outlier in Nigerian culture. America tends to be able to create the Steve Jobses of the world.
Yeah,
it tends to be able.
Yeah,
go ahead.
As someone who was in academia, I can tell you that people from all around the world are coming here to go to school for a reason, right? And then when they come here to go to school, we want them to stay because we want to keep that talent here. That's what we want, you know. You don't want to come educate that talent, then send that talent back out to serve. You know, they don't understand. America's economic and military advantage comes from our advancement in knowledge, right?
Yes.
And it's not just knowledge from American-born people,
right?
You know,
right?
It's not. It's the fact that we bring the collection of the world's best here, right? And that's what makes us special. It's not about being American-born. No, best and brightest. If you can't compete, step your game up. Study harder, work harder.
That's it.
You know,
I mean, one of the things I love about as hard as it is, one of the things I love about being in business for myself is that if there's something that's going wrong, I got to look in the mirror.
Yep.
If I'm getting beat, I got to look in the mirror. I don't get to blame anybody else. I love that I have people around me that if I try to blame the economy, they're like, "No, it's your fault." I appreciate that, and that's got to be the American attitude. I'm going to be the best, and if I'm not the best, I'm going to acknowledge where I need to get better, and I'm going to work on being the best. There's a thing you said earlier, man, that I want to touch on before we get out of here.
Okay.
You talked about multiculturalism. You said that you don't believe in multiculturalism, and I think that that's very poignant. And I think that a lot of people need to understand what we mean when we say that, because I agree with you. I'm not for multiculturalism. I do not think that multiculturalism works. Another word that I think is going to help people understand that better is pluralism, where you believe that you can have a bunch of different fundamental belief systems coexist together in harmony. That does not work. That's what we mean when we say multiculturalism. That doesn't mean that you can't have Puerto Rican and Indian and Black American coexist. It doesn't mean that. When we talk about culture, America is a culture. It's hard for Americans to see that because a lot of Americans have not spent time, haven't spent enough time in another culture. I'm thankful that I've had the opportunity to live in a different country for a few years and to experience a different culture. They did not look at me, even though I looked like them, they did not look at me as one of them. They looked at me as an American. I was an American. I wasn't. I didn't go there and they were like, "Oh, my black brother." No, I was an American. I was other. America is a culture, and I'm saying. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is what you're saying as well, Kevin, is that if you want to see America succeed, everybody here has to embrace American culture. That's why multiculturalism doesn't exist. When we say that it doesn't work, When we say that multiculturalism doesn't work, we mean that you cannot take a fundamentally different culture, i.e., I don't want to say Chinese. Can you have Chinese people come here and be awesome and be more American than a lot of Americans? But when we're talking about a communist Chinese culture, that does not work. Those two things cannot coexist. The same thing that we talked about earlier in the show. Islamic culture cannot coexist with American culture. It can't. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my buddy Tom said, like, he loves multiculturalists from the standpoint of, bring all your food. Like,
please do.
I want the Puerto Rican food. I want the Jamaican food.
That's right. That's right.
That's the kind of multicultural. Yeah, we want, but in terms of our mainline kind of operating system, the way we the way the country should work, the way our laws should work, the way just those basic values of a country. When you go to a country, you have to adopt and embrace those values and beliefs. You have to assimilate. And so if you stay into your own echo chamber, cultural echo chamber, and you don't come out of it, you can't thrive within the majority culture. And that's one of the issues with illegal immigration. Even like from South America, if they come here, they don't speak the language, if they still just stay in these small, isolated communities, that's not good for them, and it's not good for us.
That's right.
They have to assimilate to America and American values and American way of life. And so that's what we're talking about. It's not that people from different cultures can't come here. It's not that they can't keep their heritage, Mexican heritage or Chinese, and celebrate. No. But at the end of the day, there's a common culture that we still must share. And that's what we're talking about. Yeah. And so, that's key to any nation. That's not just here. Any nation has to have a common culture that unites everyone together. Plain and simple.
Yep.
So,
and that's real, folks. I mean, I know that goes against every DEI. I mean, I just basically lit the DEI book on fire, the playbook on fire. But that's reality, and you can look at any civilization in the world. If you don't have a common belief system, and I would tend to argue that the reason that Western countries are so successful is because they are heavily influenced or based on a Christian belief system that has a certain view of human rights and responsibilities towards each other, and the rule of law. If you don't have that, you're not going to have a successful country that encourages people to reach their full potential.
Absolutely not. And I'll just give an example because I know we got to get out. We got to wrap it up. But there are certain parts of the world where corruption is just expected.
Yep.
Within government, within officials, it is just a norm to be corrupt, to take a bribe, to expect a bribe if someone wants something done. Like, corruption is just within their culture. And they don't see anything wrong with it. That's just what you do. That's just the norm. There are many places in the world where that is just normal behavior. It's their culture. And to us in the West, who come from a Christian influenced culture, we look at that as like, no, you're not supposed to be corrupt. No, you're not supposed. You're supposed to, this is about justice and fairness. And the whole world doesn't have that mindset or belief system, and so, that's just one way in terms of like multiculturalism and how it just, people don't understand how Christianity affects a lot of the things we believe, even if you're not a Christian, and it shapes a lot of our norms that just aren't prevalent in places where it's not. So, yeah,
man. Yeah. Well said, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. So, man, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I just we never did a drink check. We never did a drink check.
We did not.
What you drinking on, man?
I had my normal. I had my my tequila, and I did have some Country Time lemonade, but I spiced it up a little bit tonight. I had some pineapple and mango juice in it, and so it was very.
Okay.
I was very fruity. I was very fruity tonight.
Okay. I respect that. That sounds like a great drink. I've been drinking Limestone Branch single batch rye whiskey. This was gifted to me by a friend of mine. It's a single barrel. Very good stuff. Very good stuff. So
see, you're a real man. You're drinking whiskey, brown liquor, and I'm like, nah, give me the party stuff.
Hey, I love to do that too. I love to do that too. But I will say, what was it, about 5 years ago now, almost 5 years ago, some of my buddies got me into drinking bourbon and never looked back.
It was about 4 toes. That lemonade, it was about 4 toes. I didn't want to make it too strong. I wasn't trying to lose too many.
I forgot to ask that, how many toes. I mean, it's Country Time. Country Time ain't that many toes. It's not that many toes.
No, but let's be real, man. You gotta add sugar to that. Don't just do.
Bro. Please tell me you didn't add sugar to that.
Absolutely,
bro. You lose. Oh man, that's definitely toe count just went up. He had. Oh man, yo.
Yep, fruity. Hey, when it comes to alcoholic beverages, I am fruity tooty. I am. I'm not an alcohol drinker, so when I drink something, if I can put an umbrella in it, I'll drink it. That's kind of me.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness, man. Yeah, that it's definitely. I'm gonna have to agree with Matt. That's at least 4 toes, bro. If you put sugar in the Country Time, that's at least 4 toes.
Absolutely. That's what I said. I can't do no 1 toe. A no toe. No, nah.
Man, see that? Man, you showing up from Alabama, bro.
Absolutely. Look, in the South, we die early, but we die happy. Like, we eat good. So we enjoy our life.
My gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Future, please pray.
Yeah.
Please pray
I appreciate
for this man.
I do, man. I love chick drinks. Yep. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness, man. Y'all are the best audience ever. Thank y'all so much for being here, man.
Yeah. Thank y'all for joining us tonight. We appreciate y'all's support. If you can, make sure you like, subscribe to the channel, share it on social media, tell your friends about it, and also check out our merch store to get the Unburdened merch. We got to get some Informed Take merch on there too, man.
We do.
Yeah.
I got to get some Informed Takes merch on there. Y'all, man, for real. Y'all need this for Inauguration Day. Y'all need to head over to the store.
Oh, that's for real. Inauguration Day. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, but until next time, y'all. Stay informed.
Stay informed, y'all. Thank y'all so much.